joining us this evening for the dialogues on education with Gen Z solvers from around the world. In case you're already not familiar, Worldview is a Gen Z focused experiential learning company. We're about 10 years old and we build various programs that immerse young people into real world problem solving around issues such as environment conservation, sustainable habitats, global citizenship, and various others which we believe are necessary to be solved in the world today. As we say, our mission is to build a generation of solvers, and that's what we have been focusing on all of these years. At our core, when we are developing all our programs, we speak about how developing adaptive capacities, the capacity to positively leverage emerging and situations and challenges, is the key to leadership. And this particular COVID situation has actually thrown that right back at us because it's forcing our organization to adapt. And we are challenged as everybody else around the world. And as we were figuring our way forward, one thing was unanimous among our team, that our work to build a generation of solvers that cannot stop, and the lockdown will not hold us back. So presenting to you our first fully online initiative, the Gen Z Solvers Interactive, which is very simply a platform for Gen Z around the world to interact and engage with some dreamers, some change makers, some entrepreneurs, artists, and thinkers. While we are engaged in a lot of interactions and dialogues, ultimately our aim is for our attendees to take inspiration from these conversations and go out there and act, right? As soon as the lockdown ends, of course. So today, as part of this interactive, we have some Gen Z solvers and change makers from around the world. But before I get to that, I have to share some instructions with you, which is you can ask questions throughout the conversation. There is a chat function and a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen where you can type in your questions to any of the panelists. You can either put it generally or address it to one of the panelists. You can drop in your questions at any time during the conversation. Also, this webinar is being streamed live. You will find the link on the top left corner if you're on desktop. In case you'd like to share it with anyone in your family, feel free to do so. All right, moving on. So the dialogue on education, with Gen Z solvers, we have a simple objective here. We want to focus on the fantastic journeys that each of our solvers has had, and then we want to see what we can learn from that. As Gen Z, as educators, as organizations, what can we learn, to build education for the future is something that we will focus on during this interaction. We've got Keita from the US. He's originally from Liberia, but right now in the US. We've got Garvita, who's from India and from Bangalore. And then we have got Marian from Mexico. But to begin with, I'd like to start the conversation with Keita, who participated in his first peaceful rally at a young age of 9. He went on to address the World Summit of Nobel Laureates. He's addressed the Human Rights Council on Child Protection. He's advocated for national legislation on child rights as a member of the Children's Parliament in Liberia. He's played a pivotal role in getting an act passed. He was awarded the International Children's Peace Prize in 2015, something that Greta Thunberg received last year, if I'm not wrong. And he's currently studying at Yale University. Wow, that's a fairly exhaustive list, Keita, and I don't think I've run through all of them. Anyway, what I'd like to know is, where did it all start? What was the genesis of this journey?
Let me begin by saying good afternoon, good evening to those who have joined us today. It is great to have you all, and I will be honored to answer whatever questions that may arise during this conversation. So my advocacy started at a very young age when I was about 8, 9 years old. There was a girl in my community who was raped by her foster parents, and as a young person of conscience, as somebody who from a very early age, I detested the idea of injustice. So I decided to act. I joined a group of young people who were protesting to demand justice for this 13-year-old girl who was raped and then killed by her foster father. So that was the moment that I realized that I needed to do something, that I needed to join the fight to end violence against children. For me, that was my sort of a moment of awakening. I was born during the Liberian Civil War, the last part of the Liberian Civil War. When I was about 3 years old, my father was killed, and he used to be a driver for a humanitarian relief organization. And I was born in a very disenfranchised community, a rejected community, I would say, where poverty is the rule rather than the exception. So I grew up in a community where I saw violence happening. I saw girls who were not respected as compared to their counterparts, their male counterparts. So women were told that they only belong in the kitchens, that they could not go to school. My own mother didn't go to school. She never saw the rectangular walls of a classroom. So growing up, I saw all of these things and I was taking notes of them. But that moment when that 13-year-old girl was raped, that was my moment of awakening. That is how I decided to act by organizing protests throughout Liberia.
It's quite powerful, and that experience I'm sure must have been very traumatic, but it's how you channelized that towards doing something very positive which is wonderful. But I also want to ask you a little bit about uh, while the fire was there in your belly, there must have been a lot of abilities that you required to do the kind of things that you did, right? What were those abilities that you had to develop, and how did you go about developing those?
Well, the first and foremost thing is there must be the passion in you. You must develop the passion for what you want to do. So from a very early age, I will, for instance, when I get whipped by an adult, because in where I grew up, whipping children, beating children was or is a means of punishing them. That's the way people believe that, hey, we can bring out this child well, right? So when I was growing up, I saw all of these things around. And one of the things I will always do is to tell my mother that, hey, this is wrong. Why are they doing this to kids? So I always did that. But then the passion was there. I was passionate about what I wanted to speak about. I also had courage, the courage to stand up, and say this is wrong and call out the wrong. Before then, I loved watching. I loved reading about other things that people were doing generations before I was born. So, for instance, I was reading the stories of people like Mahatma Gandhi and people like Bhagat Singh and Shivara Rajguru. These were Indian young people from India. Who from a very early age they recognized that injustice needed to be fought. Not with violence, but with peace, like Gandhi said, the Satyagraha method.
That's lovely. We'll come back to probe a little bit deeper into your story, Keita. But before I move to Marian, who's in Mexico right now, I actually want all our attendees who are here to just say hi and probably even tell us where they're from, so we know, their probably their name, where they are coming from, and what they're looking forward to. Before we go into the Q&A, you can say hi to us. Uh, Marian, I think you grew up in fairly different circumstances. You've been an education activist for a really long time now. You founded your initiative called the School on Road to educate underprivileged children, especially in areas of STEM. You've been chosen to be part of the Facebook community leadership program, and then you also run community projects to drive STEM learning in rural areas of Mexico. So these are all some very interesting things that you have been doing, and again, someone who started at a very young age. And you mentioned when we spoke earlier that you felt that you were born in a family where there was privilege. You had parents who were educators, so perhaps very different circumstances from that of Keita. So, what inspired your journey as a solver?
First of all, I want to say hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all you to organizing this. And yeah, I definitely grew in different circumstances as Kita. I was born in a small town in Mexico that is called Sabinas Hidalgo. And my mom and dad are both teachers. Also, my uncle, my aunts, everyone around me are teachers. So I really grew in an environment where getting educated was really, really important. And it is still like my dad is always like after me on getting educated every day, Um, and I founded School on the Road when I realized that I had the privilege to have a seat in school, and that was a privilege that not everyone had. And education should be a basic a basic right. It should be guaranteed for everyone. Um, School on the Road came for a very personal place. It came for when I realized that I had skills and I had the power to change what I wanted to change with them. So that's how we started School on the Road. We always like to say that School on the Road, more than being an organization, it's like a family. It's a group of people trying to change what they want, building community around our already existing community. There's a lot of good people out there. We just have to like find each other and focus our skills in making the change that we want to see in the world.
Right. It's interesting because you founded an organization at a very young age. And while you've had the privilege of having a lot of educated people around you and you've had great education, starting an organization requires a very different set of skills. And you have to build teams, you have to raise funds, you have to make budgets, lots of different things.
Yeah.
Do you think you were prepared for them, or were those things that you had to pick up on the way?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think no one is really prepared to build an organization from one day to another. You really need a set of skills that you have to pick up on the way. I definitely didn't learn them in school, which I like to like talk about this a lot. That our school is not preparing us for, with real life skills. Um, I found mentors along the way. I found friends that teach me one another a skill. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you need to know, like on building organizations, like one-on-one budgets, planning, sustainability plans, making connections around, and also like knowing, getting the real information of what you're doing, like making sure that the work you do, it's a well done work, so yeah, definitely the set of skills that you need for organization are, you're not going to find them in school, at least not in high school and before that. But I do believe like being open to learn from others that are not necessarily teachers. It's really an amazing skill that I have, and I hope everyone who wants to be a change maker has it, because that's the way you're gonna get this kind of skills to build your own organization or to support an already existing organization.
All right, Marianne. So we'll move to introducing Garvita, who herself is a multi-skilled and multi-talented person. So Garvita founded an organization called Why Waste at a very young age of 15. She's represented India at the Global Youth Summit. She's been nominated as an Ashoka Innovator, as a Global Change Maker. Not just that, she's a trained Kathak dancer, which is an Indian classical dance form. And she conveys her message through comics and drawings as well. So, Garvita, you've always mentioned about how Why Waste aims to bring about a mindset change. So, while introducing yourself, it'd be great if you could tell a little bit about what is this mindset change that you're trying to drive.
Yes, absolutely. So, hi everyone. It's really exciting to be here today, and thank you for joining us. Thank you to the State of Youth and to Worldview for organizing this. Especially, you guys have put up something so wonderful. It's always great to be engaged with you. And so, quickly about me, I'm Garvita Gulhati. I'm a 20-year-old change maker and environmentalist from India. My work, I think I've been an environmentalist for a very, very long time. And my first ever moment of realization was probably when I was 13 years old. But I went on to start my organization called Why Waste when I was 15. And what we primarily work towards is changing the mindsets of people towards natural resources, specifically water, how they can optimize its usage, prevent its wastage, and really coming up with simple solutions to solve this global water crisis. And beyond that, I'm very engaged in building programs that help young people around the world realize their potential to become change makers and actually help enable them do that as well. I worked with several organizations. And I also run a program of my own called Lead Young at Schools, which helps youth around the world listen to stories of young people and really get motivated and inspired by it. And it's really telling them that we're all the same. We all see problems around us and we have the capacity to solve it. Now, why and how did I start this journey? When I was in my school years, I would probably be in 10th grade if you were in the Indian system. And I came across, on a World Environment Day presentation, I came across this piece of information that said 14 million liters of water is wasted every year simply in the water that we leave behind in glasses at restaurants. And while this number was tremendously shocking for me at that point. It did not strike immediately, but at the same time, it was a year in India when farmers across the country were facing severe drought crisis. It was like the first time we hit, drought, and I firsthand saw around me people who lacked the access to water while we so trivially wasted it. And then I really experienced that, water leaving behind in glasses thing at restaurants when I went out for a meal with my family. And I realized how we do it without realizing. And that's what made me think that, if such a small amount can account for such a large number, then it needs to be changed, because there are thousands and millions of people around the world who lack the access to water, and there are people even dying because of it. So it really is our duty to conserve as much as we possibly can and consume as less as we can. Now, coming to what Aditya asked about the mindset change, I believe that not all problems can be solved by big tech solutions, or someone coming and telling you this is how you have to do it. um, it really is about the way we look at resources. One of the biggest reasons that our environment has faced so much destruction is because of the rise of consumerism. And consumerism, again, is a mindset where you think that you need all of those things, but actually you just want them. So it's very important for us to realize what is important and what isn't. And very often, just a simple mindset change can make a very big difference.
All right, Garvata, I think we'll come back to you. I just want to share it with all our attendees that I see some of you raising hands. If you have any questions, please put it in chat or in the Q&A box so we can pick them up a little later. Uh, I want to go back to Keita over here and ask him that, in this journey that you had, there must have been a lot of fears, a lot of uncertainties, and, there must have been a lot of obstacles and challenges that you faced, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to start with you, but then I'd also want to go into asking Garvita and Marian to also share their thoughts on this. Did your school or did your education until then or during that period really help you and prepare you to face those fears, those uncertainties, and those obstacles?
It definitely did. My education helped me. I don't want to say my school, because here's the thing. A wise man once said that I do not allow my school to get in the way of my education. Right. So it is the same with my story. While I was born, like I said, I was born in a slum. Where education was something that was far from being realized, and access to education was so difficult a task. So but why I didn't start school from at an early age. I started school when I was 9 years old, primary school. I went to a public school, and in my country public schools are out of order. I would say they are very dilapidated. We have a broken education system. But one of the things that helped me was my interest in continuously reading and understanding the world around me. So I was not just relying on materials. When I started school, I was not relying on materials that I received in my classroom. programs. I was reading books. I was reading novels. I was taking people's phones and asking them, can I go on BBC? Can I go on CNN? Can I read the Hindu the India Times? Can I, so that I can be aware and informed about the issues that were happening around me. So it was because of these but because of me, taking on the initiative to learn things by myself and not having to wait for someone to tell me, that it helped me a lot. You talk about fear. Fear is something that is not part of my equation. In fact, I don't know anything called fear. I have done what I do with what I've done with courage, with passion, knowing that whatever I am doing is going to pay off. It may not pay off during my lifetime. It may pay off some other time. So whenever I lead protests in Liberia, whenever I organize people, that is really my strength. My strength is to organize people. I always do with the hope that uh, I would not. I should not be afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to be afraid, because if I get afraid, then how are we going to change the status quo? And the status quo needs to be disrupted. Things not ought to be the way they are. We should see it, the way they ought to be. So yeah, school, Liberia, the education system is terrible. Kids go to school on hungry stomach. I was born in a family where I'm the first high school graduate and first college generation student in my family. Nobody in my family prior to me, going as far back as the 1200s AD. Nobody in my family went to school, got into high school. My elder sister stopped in the 11th grade. But when I went to school, I went with the passion that I'm getting an education for myself and for my family.
That's lovely, Keita. I think beautiful point that you made there about education and school. I mean, that actually want to go to Marian about that, because you're something who are actively promoting volunteering as a way to develop the skills and capacities, and in fact a way to get educated. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Why you believe volunteering is so essential?
Yeah, as Kita said, I don't want to say like my school is the one that gave me these skills, but definitely the education around me and experiences I have had, and definitely volunteering as a first-hand changed my life. And then when I realized that it could change someone's perspective on a topic, and it can also give you skills, and it can also help, I don't know, maybe like your self-esteem, seeing that you can do something for others. I realized that volunteering should be an essential part of our educational system. It's really hard to promote volunteering as part of it, especially, for example, in underprivileged schools, underfunded schools. But definitely on really well-funded schools here in Mexico, volunteering will show students how can they use their skills to really change. Um, I do believe when you go outside your bubble or your comfort zone, you can actually see what great change can your skills do in the world. So yeah, volunteering for me is basics. And School on the Road has this volunteering week in which we go during the summer to a local school, and we college students try to teach STEM subjects, which are science, technology, engineering, and maths, to younger children. And that's our volunteering week. And that way, college students can share the skills, and children are actually learning something of the skills or of what are supposed to be the skills of the future. Yeah.
So I'm tempted to ask more questions myself, because I have so much to ask you. But then I
Yeah.
think I shouldn't be greedy, and I want to go to some of the questions from the audience. You all can also pick up the Q&A and see if there are any questions over there. So so I see that there are a few questions which are related to specific issues, or specifically to each one of you individually. I think we could take something about the pandemic. What will happen if an education? What do you think is the prime responsibility of Gen Z should in a situation as COVID-19? How can we differentiate between helping others and being safe at the same time? It's a tough question when we're jumping from the conversations that we've been having so far to something about the pandemic. So maybe we'll come back to that. I actually have a one question picking up on what Keita and Marian said, which I want to ask Garvita, after which I'll come back to these questions. This is about something you spoke about when we last discussed this, Garvita, about an environmental sciences teacher who had an impact on your story. Can you share that with everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So I would really credit the fact that I have so much of an environmental inclination and a mindset to a particular teacher from my school. She Her name is Mrs. Purnima, and so environmental education is not a subject that's really taught in schools, but she is really passionate about it. And ever since I was in the 6th grade, which is almost 10 years ago, a little less than 10 years ago, sorry, she's been teaching this subject, and she teaches it alone to 6 different grades, which is almost 24 classes, and she does that throughout the week, and she engages us in activities and learning experiences that can really help us understand what's happening in the environment around us. She used to make us ideate and build our perspectives of what the world would probably look like. And I still remember when I was in the 6th grade, she made us do this activity where on a book, she made us draw the earth, and on one half she was like, draw what the earth was like and what you think the future is going to be like. And almost everyone had its future as gray with like robots, and previously it was obviously green. And I think that was an experience that stuck. And then beyond that, she went on to make us study this cartoon, which was basically a tourist bus that, instead of going to see like a monument or something, they went to see a tree. And everyone had oxygen tanks on their backs instead of like a hiking backpack or something like that. And I think that, and when you shared earlier that I use cartoons to propagate this message, because I just think the message that they bring out is so powerful, because that's what really changed me. And coming back to my teacher, I think we need more strong-headed teachers like her, who really believe in these issues, because they are the problems of today. And going back to what Marian and Keita was speaking about, how it's not their schools, but it's their education probably that has changed them. I would in some ways agree to that. And there is something very important as change makers, and I call this like change maker education. So empathy, teamwork, leadership, and change making are 4 skills that you cannot learn out of any book or in any classroom. It is 4 skills that you have to go on ground and learn. And when your school brings you experiences like this, which I honestly and thankfully had, thanks to that environmental education teacher that we had, but you can still imagine there were almost 2,000 students learning under her, but not everyone still went ahead to probably start doing something in this space, or protecting the environment. So again, it's really your initiative also that makes a lot of difference, picking up on opportunities that you gain, picking up on the skills. And I think, like Keita mentioned, having the thirst to learn more is what's really going to help us move forward. Sorry if I wavered from your question a little
No,
bit.
I think that was on point. In fact, I also want to ask Keita and Marian to share their views on that. Were there those influential educators or mentors, could be anywhere, anyone, could be friends, who played a significant role in the early parts of your journey? Because I also have some questions here where people are asking about what was it like to start, and what was where did you begin? So, are those who are those influential people?
Um, well, the influential people in my life, first was my mother. my mother played a big part in who I have become. Like I said earlier, she never saw a classroom. She was born in a culture where girls were not even addressed by their names. Girls were either called the daughter of X or the mother of Y or the wife of Z. Um, yeah, so she influenced me looking at her story and looking at the kind of compassion and courage she had after the death of my father. She stuck with us, her children. There are four of us, and yeah, gave us in the midst of the poverty, in the midst of the hardship. She remained. She stood her ground, and she played her role better than my father would have played. Better than my father would have, played the fatherly role. Yeah, so that's it. And then the second thing is my sisters. Uh, when I was growing up, I feel that whenever my sisters were mentioning conversations, these were only conversations about marriage. Oh, when are we going to get this person married? When is this girl leaving his house? She has to go to her husband's house, and I felt something was wrong with that. I felt my sisters needed to be mentioned when there are conversations about going to school, when there are conversations about becoming independent, about getting a livelihood and establishing your own life and own business. So these were the people that influenced me. Frankly, I was born, like I said, I was born in a time when Liberia was fighting a 14-year civil war. So there is, and I say this with sincerity, there is not much of a public figure in Liberia who sort of like influenced my life. I always say my generation, my generation doesn't look up to an older generation in my country because most of the people in the older generation were people who fought wars, who were perpetrators of social injustices. So my generation, we broke with the status quo, and we were just depending on skills and things we learned by reading and going back to the pages of history and responding to the immediate demands, the immediate issues that we were confronted with, while I was growing up. So these are the people that have had a big impact on my life. Of course, there are other young people right now who inspire me. For instance, Marian and Gavita and Grita and Malala. I mean, many thousands of other young people around the world who every time I look at their story, I read their story, I feel inspired, to continue demanding for change.
Marianne, anything that you'd want to add?
I think I want to add that around where Gabita and Kita said, and I can think that the three of us, and I definitely know that other change makers and all of attendees can agree with this, that a teacher can really be anyone, and rather than learning stuff from institutions or schools as organizations, we learn from people because the work we do as citizens, as change makers, I think Wolby calls them solvers. It's a work for the people, so it has to come from the people.
So there are a couple of questions that I found interesting and something that I definitely wanted to touch upon, which was one was about how can we enable others around us to be change makers and acquire skills to create positive change. I felt that's a very important question because even if I look at your journeys, there probably were hundreds of other children of the same age who were experiencing the same things that you were experiencing, but obviously the inspiration or the confidence was only there for a few of you. So the question I think for all of us as educators to think about is how do we enable more such solver stories to come? And I'd like any of you to take the lead or share your thoughts on that aspect.
Sure, Aditya, I could start off. So like I mentioned earlier, I have this initiative that it's called Lead Young at Schools, where we solely focus on helping more and more young people become change makers. And the philosophy behind it really is that, we all see problems around us, and there's always some kind of a solution that we have for it, but it's very rare that we actually go out there and act. And the reason for that could be a lot of different things. And very often, all we need is just a little bit of a push and a little bit of motivation and understanding to do it. And I believe that stories are very powerful if told in the right way. So what we do at Lead Young is really share stories of young change makers from around the world, like Abraham, Marian, like Keita, like anyone around the world who really has picked up, gone out there and made a difference. And we try to share stories that come from a varied, distribution of people and with different kinds of experiences, so that we can touch as many people as possible and try and make them understand that it doesn't matter where you come from, you can make a difference. So it's really telling young kids that they have the capacity to do it, they have the capacity to make the change. There are a lot of ways where you can actually get them into the thinking process, but really, instead of making it like, a classroom activity again, what we try to do is really get the youth itself to share these stories or enact these stories and then motivate more young people. So I think, and especially for us as young change makers, it's so important for us to tell and get everyone around the world to become a change maker, because I think change is the only constant. But I think right now the world is in the constant need of change makers, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference. And it is the job of us already existing change makers to help and get everyone around us to, also make a difference.
Yeah, very briefly, Aditya. Kavita stressed a very important point, and that is the idea of telling stories. So I'm one of the persons who don't go to young people, my colleagues, my peers, and be like, you know what, these are you come and be a change maker, stand up for change. Every time I meet young people, I meet my colleagues, I meet peers. What I try to do is that I tell them about the issues that exist in their environment, that these issues have no boundaries. For instance, the issue of sexual violence, is universal. The issue about climate change is universal. The issue about education is universal, right? The issue about healthcare is universal. So what I try to do is to tell them the story. So I don't go and be like, you know what, come and be a change maker like me, right? Or come and be a change maker like Malala or Gavita or Marianne, right? I tell them the story, the issues that are happening, and it is left with them based on their own conscience to stand up and demand change. That is how I believe we can motivate young people, we can inspire them to become change makers. Let it come from their own volition. Otherwise, people will become change makers because Gavita is popular, therefore I want to be a change maker, to be on social media and talk about the issues that she's talking about. But I believe if we tell them the problems, tell them that they are victims of this problem. They may not be direct victims; they are indirect victims. So from the beginning, I talk about the story of Angel, talk about the 13-year-old girl who was raped and killed by her foster father, and many other cases that I've been a part of in Liberia, to an extent where I've been sort of like ordered arrested by a court in Monrovia. What I always say is that we are all global citizens. What affects one affects all. So once I say that to young people, they know that we all have to do something.
So
Yeah,
go ahead, Mary.
well, I wanted to make a point also. I think Garvita, Kita, and also I and Worldview has remarked the fact that we all need to be change makers. And then the question is, how do I become a change maker? And definitely sharing stories and that it's amazing. But I also want to point out that when we say that you become a change maker, we definitely don't mean start an NGO and gather all of that amount of work. We mean, as I said, volunteer. That's one amazing step to be a change maker. I know a lot of guys in this call are from India. Well, there's Y ways, and definitely Gavita must need volunteers. Maybe right now not online. There's not a lot of online work you guys can do, but definitely after the pandemic passes, there'll be a lot of work that can be your first step on becoming a change maker. You guys all have resources, and these organizing and becoming a change maker is not about taking the lead on running an organization or taking the lead on passing a bill on something. It's more about taking a first step to change what you want to do. And someone asked something about how have social injustice changed our lives. Definitely, social injustices are the reason why we become change makers. And it might not happen to you, but might happen to someone you know. And that's enough reasons for you to become a change maker.
No, I think there are a couple of questions here which I can sort of feel like I can combine. One is about I think it's very topical, this question about online education in the current situation that we are in. Someone asked about what your views are on online education, but I'll change it slightly. Do you think these kind of changes that you're talking about, or these solver journeys, can be triggered off online? If yes, how have you all used social media or any other tools digitally to get more people to join you in this?
Yes,
Uh,
uh, you go
go ahead. Go
first.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, I think change making can happen anywhere, and being an activist can happen anywhere. Like, for example, let's talk about gamers. You know, the gamer community, it's been really criticized that they don't do anything and they're just playing games. But the gamer community last year raised a lot of money for planting trees. And that's an amazing way to online make a change, you know? So I definitely think activism, it's in everywhere, online, physical, any place. You just have to find like the way to adapt it. No one was prepared for this pandemic. No one was prepared to move our whole lives online. We have to make the best of it. And yeah, I definitely believe activism, change making, you can do it anywhere, from taking a conversation in your dinner table with your family whom you are quarantining with, to being a gamer and join other gamers around the world to raise money and trees to plant them. So yeah, that's what I have to say on it.
In the middle of all of this, Abraham, somebody said that they really like your shirt and they'd like to know if there's some cultural significance to it. So you can take that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an African shirt. It's an African cloth. I usually wear it when I feel I'm having a good day, and when I also have calls like these, yeah. So basically, there is not a specific meaning. It is just a way for me to remain rooted in my culture, remembering who I am, wherever I am, wherever situation I find myself in. So that is basically, the shirt is basically something to remember my roots. Yeah.
So, since we are on an informal note, I actually want to break into that a little bit and ask each of you, what were you like in school? Did you, in a class, if I met Marian or Garvita or Keita as a ninth grader in school, what were you guys like?
Well, for me, when ninth grade, I remember my friends would call me too serious. They said I was too serious about things I was doing. So I was not the person who was interested in going for school parties. And by the way, I don't hate baby prom or something, or back to school jam. I don't hate it. But then uh, my interest was simply, in things that I'm passionate about, advocacy. So yeah, sometimes they will call me a nerd. Some will call me antisocial person. I guess that was because from a very young age, I was speaking about all these different issues, and I was passionate about it and challenging the status quo. Yeah, so if you met me in ninth grade, you will see a kid who was maybe reading a newspaper, or reading some novel, reading some story, some poem. That was me in ninth grade.
For me, I think not completely the same, but slightly similar. Not very fond of, outings and parties and all those kind of things. I still am not. Still enjoy doing, the advocacy and the change making a lot more. But definitely, I could say I was a social person. So I remember this point in school when someone would say, oh, so you can go to Gavita, she knows everyone. But that's probably changed a little bit now, little bit in my own cocoon. But I used to be the kind, but I still somewhat am the person. I love people. I love engaging with them. I love, speaking to them. I think there's so much to learn from everyone around us and everyone's experiences and stories. So that's what I was kind of like also in, I guess, high school, but not nothing much. I hadn't done anything significant with my life, and neither was I. I would just, like a good Indian student, stereotypical student, get my good marks and just do everything the teacher says. So that's kind of what I was, and then I think I really transformed in like 11th and 12th, became like a rebel and slightly went on to a completely different path. So yeah.
Just briefly before Marian, somebody asked me whether when people call me boring and stuff like that, whether that was a demotivating factor. Absolutely, it was saying I had friends. But what I was saying is basically I was not the conversation type. You would not come to me and then I will be into and then you expect me to be into conversations, just casual conversations. My conversations were basically about if I met a peer, I would be telling the peer about rape and sexual violence and what needs to be done and how society needs to rise up and fight injustices. So it was not motivating. In fact, I joked about it. Every time people say you are boring, I'm like, well, yeah, that's because I don't know how to talk to people casually. But if you called me and talk about, creating change and talking about school, these were things that I was very good at. That didn't mean I never had friends. I had friends, a lot of them. They helped me in organizing and leading protests. And even when we passed the children's law in Liberia, it was because of the work that me and my friends we did. Yeah, but when it came to social conversations, that was just not my style. I was very terrible at that.
Well, I'm majoring in math and physics, so it's kind of like the stereotype that I'm a school nerd. Definitely, I was in books all the time in classes, but I'm also really loud to be in a class with. So yeah, I think that's who I am in a class. I wanted to answer two questions that some of the attendees sent. The first one, it's from Mahua. I'm hoping that I pronounced that right. It says, as you also have mentioned in the thirst for education, there are many kids and even adults in rural areas who have this thirst, but due to several reasons, they don't receive proper education and educational material. There are also lack of parent involvement and also lack of teachers. My question is, what's your opinion on this? As a person that works really, really close with education in rural areas, I know that it's way more difficult than in urban areas because, as you mentioned, there's no teachers, parents are not really involved. How do you want to teach, for example, to these kids or adults technology if there's not technology getting to those places? But I think that's where you come in as a privileged person that has a seat in education. I don't want to like put this burden on you, but I think it's kind of like you're lucky enough to have a seat in education. Now it's your duty to try to extend that seat to other persons. So what can you do, or how can you take the educational materials, teachers to these rural areas, and how can you turn this problem into building community that wants to help education in rural areas? Yeah, that's my opinion on that. And then the other question, it's also on education. It doesn't say who the user is. It says Apple. It says education in most countries is perceived as the only thing that guarantees a job or a career opportunity. This mindset of parents and society has been discouraging most young minds and not taking up actions in tasks that they truly believe in, thinking it could be a distraction. How did all of three manage to convince your parents and teacher in taking up actions towards what you believe? Did you have such situations? I definitely had this situation, especially with my mom. She used to think, and I know that she still thinks, that running a nonprofit is distracting me from my career in math and physics. It's an thing that I'm sure Garvita and Kita experienced as well. Like people around you are always gonna tell you, like, or at least to me, it happens that people say, hey, why do you wanna create a nonprofit to educate children if you're not even educated yourself? Um, but then you have to see if you truly believe in what you do and you work you do, it's not going to be a distraction. You're just going to have to find a way to balance your work as an activist and also your work growing with yourself. And believe me, activism, change making, being a solver teaches you a lot. And I'm definitely not saying that you should go out of school. Definitely you should get a degree because it's so important. But I'm saying that you also have to value whether you are really learning in school. Are you only accumulating information, or are you really learning a set of skills that are going to help you in the future and to have a purpose in the work you do? I think we can also find a lot of information of this around being a social entrepreneur, which means that you have a business, but your goal is not to make money, but to change something, and I think that's really important.
So I think, I mean, we're running out of time. I wish we had another half an hour to with you all, but I want to touch upon very quickly a couple of last questions. One is, I think, something that's on everyone's mind, and this is I'd like maybe any one of you to answer this and probably spend not more than a minute on this, which is about what do you think is going on in the minds of young people in the current situation where you're and you know, you could also share your own perspective where you're locked down at home and you know everything is going wrong out there, and is there that solver in you which is craving to go out, and if not, there is that built up you know, emotion inside you. So what can schools do when children come back to school to channelize this?
So yeah, I would just love to pick up on that because I honestly felt I felt it very deeply, and I'm not sure if I shared this with you when we were speaking earlier, Aditya, but I really deeply felt like I need to go out there and do something. But and as with the change makers mindset, I think I'm always thinking of solutions to problems around us. And what I would like to tell everyone is, with all of this anxiety and uncertainty, sometimes it's okay to just, like, stop and try and do as much as you can from home. And just remember that even staying at home is a really huge help and a favor that you're doing to the world. And, going back to school, I really believe that change maker education needs to become a norm. With the way that the world is changing, the pace and the speed, everyone needs to have the skills that a change maker has to be able to thrive in this world. And just to quickly quote from a LinkedIn study about 2 years ago, which said that most of the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world are people who started doing something at a very young age of this sort. People who took up leadership positions, let's say, for example, at an age like this, and at an age like, about in their teen years, and they actually end up being the most successful people, is because they're inculcating those skills from a really young age. And that also helps you thrive and survive through a lot of different problems that happen around you. So again, changemaker education is something that I would really enforce schools, not directly teaching principles, but experiential learning is something that would be like, Marian said earlier that you can't teach principles. Even Keita mentioned this, you need to teach, you learn from your experiences and from people. So if something like that can be introduced.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we will have to wrap up, or you know, I think people are not going to be happy with me taking so much time, although there are so many questions to be asked. uh, what I would suggest our attendees, some of whom we unfortunately haven't been able to respond to, is to write to us on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook, wherever you find us, we'll relay them to Garvita, Marian, and Keita, or you can find them and directly reach out to them with your questions. Uh, I want to take this chance to thank our partner, State of Youth, for this panel. All three of them are, in fact, members on the board of State of Youth. You can, if one of you can just mention the website of State of Youth in the interest of time, probably people can go check it out. Is it
Yeah,
stateofyouth.org?
yeah, it's stateofyou.org.
All right.
So you can also follow that. There's a page for it on Instagram. So for young people who are interested in reading about stories, like we were saying earlier, how stories have the power of motivating, inspiring people. You can go on our Instagram State of Youth, and then you will read about stories about young people who are doing amazing things from different parts of the world. It's not just members of the board of State of Youth, the youth board of State of Youth, but we have stories there about other young people from around the world. And if you go on the website, all you have to do is to become a citizen, because State of You is an online nation for young people. We are the largest nation in the world, even though it's not a physical location. But yeah, you can have a membership, and then you can follow the issues, and then we have something called referendum. Where you share opinions on different issues. Yeah, so that's the website stateofyouth.org.
Before we end, I want to quickly summarize a few things that I was making a note of. One is, I think, for a lot of Gen Z out there, I think what each of their stories tells you is that education is out there, learning is out there. So you'll need to go and find it. I don't think it is something that will come to you. And at the same time, change maker journeys, solver journeys need not be big. They can start small, they can start at home, they can start online. All you need to do is to start somewhere. And you can find your heroes anywhere as well. I think Keita read Gandhi and found inspiration in him. I think the inspiration can come from anywhere. An important thing that all of us as educators and organizations and schools involved in education need to remember is, why is it that education and schooling have to be two separate things, right? If we can bring change making, problem solving into what children learn at school, or the other way, even better, is to, I think, reimagine school to make sure that all of these, it's not just that physical space, but the entire world is the school, and the entire world is a place to learn and get educated. Can we as educators figure out ways to achieve that, is what I would say would be one of the key summaries from an education perspective. Uh, yeah, that's where I'd like to end this chat. We have gone 15, 16 minutes above what's budgeted, but then I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope all of you enjoyed it as well.
Thank you, Aditya, and thank you to all of those who joined us today. It was indeed a great conversation.
So to all the attendees who are here, you will receive a feedback form. Do share your thoughts with us, and continue to stay in touch with us and with the interactive, with all the social media channels that we have. In a lot of our posts, all three of these young Gen Z solvers are also tagged, so you can follow them and probably even write to them on Instagram if you have any specific questions. Garvita, Marian, Abraham, Laura, and Ludovica from State of Youth, thank you for being a part of this, and everybody else at Worldview as well. Thank you so much. Good evening and good day to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.